All right, we are back looking at Mage Knight, the board game. I am in this series of videos going to be walking through a complete playthrough of the solo Conquest scenario. This is the one that probably most people wind up playing the bulk of, at least until they get the Lost Legion expansion, which includes scenarios with General Voltaire that many solo players find quite compelling. This I find to be a little bit more straightforward, and as this is a attempt really at more of kind of a tutorial, I thought it would be wise to kind of keep it a little bit more vanilla. So I'm just going to run through the solo Conquest scenario, and I'm actually going to play the Mage Knight Tovak for a couple of reasons, but the big one really is I find him to be kind of the most straightforward. If you start getting into your, I don't know how people pronounce it differently, Arithia, she's got some funky wound management skills that are very powerful, very potent. She's a great character, a lot of people's favorites, but just because the mechanics of some of those skills are a little bit more involved, I thought I would just, again, keep it a little bit more vanilla. Tovak has a lot of just straightforward skills that just impact combat in very direct ways. So he's a nice, easy character to get started in the game with, and there's nothing particularly strange about his starting deck either. So I'm just going to run through some of the basics, set the stage for those of you in the audience who might be not quite familiar with the way the game runs as a whole, and then I'm going to dive in. So what I've got here is the play area set up for Tovak. Now, the base game doesn't come with this beautiful little cityscape picture, but I think it's a cool picture, so I like using it. What we've got here is you're going to have your player card and an area to keep your mana crystals. You have an inventory of mana crystals that you can build up, and those are going to be used to power your spells. I've got a deck of 16 cards. Those are my starting cards. Every Mage Knight starts with them. Once you've added the Lost Legion expansion, that deck is going to have 2 cards that are unique to your Mage Knight. They're basically just tweaks of standard decks. So the way that you can think of this is there's a standard deck of 16 cards, and that is actually possessed in its entirety by no one. Every single Mage Knight takes 2 of those cards. Again, if you're including Lost Legion expansion, takes 2 of those cards and kind of slightly soups up, makes slightly better 2 of those original 16 cards, but keeps it playing essentially the same. It's just got a little bit of a wrinkle. It might be a little bit more playable, or have a little bit more pop to it. It might be very situational, but when it comes up, it's really nice, that sort of thing. It's just a way of distinguishing the knights from one another. It's really the skills, though, that differentiate them the most. And as I said, Tovak's skills are pretty straightforward. So in my play area, I've got my deck. I'm going to have my discard pile. Over here is where I'm going to keep my tactics. As I build up my skills, as I gain levels, I'm going to start displaying them over here. These are where I'm going to place my units. Here's my 1 command token. These are my markers for the map. Here's my stack of level tokens giving my stats. And that's going to be 2 armor and 5 card hand limit to start. And that's going to be the case for levels 1 and 2. And once I get to level 3, I will have graduated, and this will turn into a command token. I can also grab wound cards and such from here. And I even have, thanks to the scripting in this tabletop simulator mod, I can actually grab tokens here to track my keeps as well. Next to my play area, I have the dummy player setup. I have opted to go with Goldix here just because every once in a while it's nice to have potion making pop up. He's got some good skills that are, again, relatively straightforward. I don't really have a giant reason for picking Gold Dix. It's as good a choice as any, really. For those of you who might not know the way the dummy player works, it's really not a whole lot more to it than a timer. The game is going to progress in a way that forces you to play through your hands a little bit more quickly based on how the dummy player is going. Essentially, the dummy player is going to run through their cards. When they run out, if it comes back to them, they are going to declare end of round, and then you have one turn left before the round is over. So the dummy player is going to keep you honest in terms of a clock, basically. The dummy player is going to turn over 3 cards, and then you're going to look at the color of the third card turned over. Every card has the colors of the has one of the 4 basic colors: white, green, blue, or red. And based on that color, you're going to refer to the crystals in the dummy player's inventory and turn over additional cards equal to the number of crystals of the color that was the third card turned over. So again, you're going to turn over 3 cards, check the color, check that color against the crystals, and turn over additional cards as needed. So there is some variation, some randomness here. If you keep turning over green cards, Gold Dix here, because he has 2 green crystals, is going to burn through his deck a whole lot more quickly. As play continues, you will see this. He will add slightly to his deck, making it bigger, but he will also be adding slightly to the crystals in his inventory so that that bigger deck is burned through more quickly. On average, his turns actually tend to accelerate as the game goes on, making it that much more of a challenge for you to get through your ever-increasing deck. Now the setup for solo Conquest is as follows. The number of dice you're going to have in the source is going to be equal to the number of players plus 2. Since I'm playing solo, there's just 1 player, lonely old me, so I have 3 dice in the source. I've already rolled them and came up with 2 greens and a gold, which is a decent start. It's always nice to have gold to play with right from the get-go, and green's often good in the beginning in case you have some of those green movement cards pop up. So that wasn't a bad roll to begin things. You're going to start on the A side of the start tile, and you're going to place your first player there. I've just got him here so we can actually see it. And we're going to be going into the wedge as opposed to the open format of the map, which means I'm going to start with 2 revealed tiles randomly drawn. The deck as it's set up is going to consist of 7 countryside, 2 core, and 2 city core tiles. The 7 countryside on top and the 4 core tiles mixed together at the bottom, so you just don't know when those 2 cities are going to pop up. The ultimate objective here is by the end of the 6th round, so I will have day, night, day, night, day, final round, night. And by the end of that, I need to have conquered both of the 2 cities, which means, of course, I need to get there. And in the process of getting there, I need to build up my power quickly enough so that I am able to conquer those cities when I finally reach them. That's going to require building up some powerful cards in my hand, building up a stash of mana to play those cards most effectively, and of course recruiting units along the way to fight alongside me. My initial draw is not too bad, not super great. I do have revealed here, I am finding a keep, a mine, a deep mine. This is from the Lost Legion expansion, this tile. Deep mines are essentially the same as regular crystal mines, as you can see here. When I end my turn on a crystal mine, I get a crystal into my inventory of that color, in that case blue. Over here it looks like what we've got is white and red. For the deep mine, you don't get both, you choose which one you would like. I've also got a glade over here to play with, a monastery. I do have a rampaging enemy, but it's on the other side of a bunch of terrain that I might not want to hoof through. I have a keep. I've got a a maze here, and I've got a town. So depending on what falls out of some of my offers, I might have a couple of things that I might want to do right off the bat. But again, I'm not going to make any decisions until I see the hand that I've been dealt, possibly reconsidering it with my choice of tactics. So I'm going to take a look at all of this here in sequence. The first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to go the rampaging enemy on that sword icon. Rampagers are always revealed, so you always know ahead of time what you're facing. That is one of these catapult enemies. They're a little tough to hit right off the bat unless you've got some movement cards to play with. But he would give me 4 fame, which would be plenty to level up. I'm not going to find out what's on that keep until I get next to it in the daytime. So I'm going to have to find out who's there. I don't know yet. None of these others are going to require getting a token, although if I go to the monastery and try to burn it down, I'm going to pull a purple to fight. And of course, if I go into the maze, I'm going to have to fight something as well, but I'm not going to drop any tokens on the map for those just yet. Here we have our fame and reputation. The fame score is what's represented by these this kind of pyramidal, larger on the bottom sort of structure here. You start at 0 up on the top and you work your way down as you gain experience. Well, it's called fame, but it's essentially experience when viewed in that respect. You're going to gain levels the more points of enemies you defeat, essentially. And every time you progress from one bar down to the next, you're gaining a level. What happens when you gain that level, you either gain an advanced action and a skill, or you advance by flipping your current stats, turning it into a command token, allowing you to recruit another unit, and at the same time revealing the next token in the stack, which has one of the 2 stats on that increased. So you either get a card added to your deck and a skill, or you add a unit and improve your stats every time you level up, alternating down to the bottom. On the reputation track, this is basically whether or not people like you. This is based on whether you've been disposing of those awful rampaging enemies, or if you've been making a nuisance of yourself tearing down castles and mage towers. When this drops down, you take penalties trying to recruit units and buy actions by help with your influence in monasteries and towns. Whereas if you gain a good reputation, it can make it easier to recruit followers or get townspeople to help you out. Essentially, if you gain or lose reputation, it goes in steps. So you might you might gain 2 for killing a draconum, you gain 1 for killing a marauder, you lose 3 for burning a monastery, and then whichever space you wind up in is going to have a number, plus or minus, indicating the modifier to any time you're trying to use influence to accomplish something. You'll notice if you get down below -5 in the negative reputation, you get this little X here, which indicates you are not going to be recruiting anybody. I don't care how much influence you throw down. Everybody just hates you way too much. All right, so let's take a look at our offers. What we're going to be doing is, because it is early in the game, I am going to be revealing a number of units in the unit offer to start, equal to the number of dice in the pool. It's number of players plus 2. Now, if I have elite gold units on offer, then they're going to alternate gold, silver in any game. But those gold units only appear once the first core tile has been revealed. So I'm going to be starting with the basic silver-backed units and just revealing 3 of those. That's scripted for me, so this is already shuffled. I just hit this and boom, those are my 3 units. So I'm going to take a closer look at that once I begin play. Another thing to take note of is I have 1 monastery on the map. So I'm going to drop this down here to indicate that there is going to be an extra advanced action card in the offer because I have the extra monastery revealed. Now, that's going here next to the units to indicate the fact that if I have a bunch of monasteries, I'm going to have a bunch of skills available in the monastery. It's not actually going into my advanced action offer. The advanced action offer is going to be usually drawn from, or at least very often drawn from, when you're gaining levels. It's also going to be playing into the dummy player, as we'll see as we get into the thick of things a little bit. You might also find rewards for certain things like ruins, potentially playing certain skills you're going to be able to draw from the offer, but essentially there are 39 advanced actions available. I'm going to get 3 to start, randomly chosen. If I gain an advanced action, I can pick really any one of those in most situations. But I want to be mindful of the fact that I've got green coming down here, and I've got green tokens over here. These advanced actions are going to be going into my dummy player's hand, so I might want to think about grabbing some of those to give myself more time later in the game. I also have 3 items in the spell offer, and this is going to be, of course, the spells that I can learn when I conquer a mage tower or the like. Now, none of these are accessible to me just yet, so we'll see how they work, how they play into things as they go forward. But essentially, these are units I can recruit depending on where they are. You see these little symbols here. On the left-hand side, there's a little village icon for the thugs. There's also a keep, which means I can hire them in a village or a keep. These guys are available again in keeps and villages, and these guys are available in monasteries and villages. So I've got a few options for recruiting right in that first village. I might want to take a look at that right off the bat, depending on the cards that I am dealt when I get started. Switching back here to the map, just surveying really quickly where I'm at. Again, I'm going to be starting here on the portal. I haven't drawn my hand yet, so I don't know what I have to play with, but it shouldn't be too hard to get into the village here, which would allow me to grab a unit, most likely, and then possibly proceed to take out the keep over here. Maybe take a stab at a maze. I've got options. I haven't made any decisions yet. I'm going to wait and see what my hand looks like. But for that, I'm going to have to just draw my random 5 cards, see what my starting hand is. Get rid of that right there. And I do have a ton of movement available, a little bit of influence, which is nice, but not a ton of attack or block. So I've got a couple of options available to me. I will get into those in just a second as I begin the actual playthrough. I just wanted to kind of survey the landscape here and make sure that for anybody who's new to the game, you're able to follow more or less what's going on. The map is going to be filling out in a wedge shape. I'm going to be eventually revealing cities out here somewhere that I need to conquer. I'm going to move across the map, conquering things and killing stuff as I go, gaining experience and ramping up my powers through the acquisition of abilities and more powerful cards. I have to manage my reputation so that I can do things like recruit units, but I can wander into a village and recruit some of these followers here if I can play enough influence to convince them to join me. I have magical energies represented by my mana dice pool, and I have certain movement costs for terrain depending, given that it is daytime. We haven't gotten into the tactics just yet. I'm going to save that for a second, but there are a slew of advanced actions that might or might not be available to me, as well as a handful of spells. These are things that I am trying to get into my deck because I want to be able to accomplish more in the little time that I have. I want to get more cards into my hand. I also want them to be powerful cards so that when I get to the cities, I am going to have a handful of powerful cards that I can throw at those cities. That's the core of the game. I cannot take my time though, because when I run out of cards, it's the end of the day and I have to move on to the night, and I only get 6 of those rounds, day, night, day, night, day, night. So time is of the essence in this game, and then on top of that, I can't always play as efficiently as I would like because I have the dummy player forcing my hand a little bit. The dummy player is forcing me to move quickly because he might declare end of round. If I let him declare end of round before I've used up many of my cards, then the round is ended. We move into the night, we both shuffle our decks back up and start over, and I have, because I've dawdled too long, I have just not used a bunch of resources at my disposal, and that's generally speaking a very bad thing because you need to get absolutely every last point that you can out of your deck. Looking at my hand as it is, I might possibly consider reshuffling. There are tactics that allow me to reshuffle. I haven't quite made up my mind here yet. It's nice that I get movement right off the bat and have a little bit of influence to go and pick up a unit. The downside of this is if I use up that movement now, I won't have any later. And I don't have a ton of combat to use once I get somewhere. So that's kind of what I'm facing right now. I'm not going to agonize over it too much, but I'll walk you through my decision process in just a minute. Let's go ahead and let's get going. Okay, so here's the situation that I'm faced with, that I'm pondering here. Most of what I'm looking at trying to get to is really far away from me, and in some cases on the end of a whole lot, on the other side of a whole bunch of terrain that's going to chew up my movement points. So I could go after this guy here, for instance. If I make a beeline for him, it's 2 points to move into the plains. It's day, so it's another 3, so that's 5 for the forest. Another 3 for the hills. Now I do grab a crystal on the way, but at that point, while I can engage the catapults, I've used 2, 5, 8 movement points. And really in engaging them, because they're fortified, now they only have 2 points of armor, but they're also physically resistant. So I'm going to have to pull out 4 points of attack, and ranged attack is no good. Early in the game I have no siege available to me, so I'm going to have to reckon with their 7-point attack. I start the game with 2 points of armor. So if I just take that, that's 4 wounds into my hand right off the bat. That is totally unacceptable for just a 4-point unit. Which means in attacking this guy, I would have to find a way to generate enough block, or because he's cumbersome, I can potentially play movement to reduce that attack before trying to block it or eating the damage. However, in spending 8 points of movement just getting there, by the time I get there and redraw my hand, I'm not likely to have a ton of movement to play with, much less than attack with afterwards. So I'm not loving the prospects of going after that guy given this particular situation. What I'm liking a lot more is going around the woods, winding up in the village here, recruiting a unit, and then either diving into the maze or possibly trying to hit this keep, depending. Because this is going to be 2 plus another 3, 5 points of movement. I can get that easily and still have movement left over. Remember, I have green in the source. And I could play some influence, maybe wait till next turn to play some influence to recruit a unit. And that's going to allow me to then pursue some of those larger goals over here. So I'm liking that a little bit. I also have the option of dipping into the forest here and grabbing a gold mana token to play with. But I'll have to make that decision based on whether I want to spend the extra 3 points of movement to get into the forest in the first place. So the decision I'm trying to make right now is what play am I going to initially play for, and therefore what tactic do I want to draw to make that the best way to go. bearing in mind a couple of other things. I really like, if possible. Now, the way the solo scenario works is you pick your tactics card, then you shuffle what's left, and the dummy player grabs one at random, which is then discarded. So the dummy player is eating up your options. So if you don't grab one of your favorite tactics, he might grab it later. That's a risk you run. Daytime tactics wise, I'm not really super enamored of any of them. I really actually haven't been a fan of Man of Steel very much at all. Maybe it's better in multiplayer games. And I think the same for The Right Moment, number 6. Really what I like best of all of them is planning. I really like getting extra cards into my hand every turn for the most part. But I find that to be much more effective late game than early game. So I like to save it. Sometimes that bites me in the butt because the dummy player grabs it. But I don't usually grab it on round 1 for that reason. I just like to have at least a shot of getting it as my round 3 or round 5 option. So really what I'm looking at is either picking Great Start in order to have some more cards in my hand to hopefully recruit a unit in this village, or possibly grabbing Rethink to maybe get rid of the Cold Toughness, which I don't plan on using right away, and one of the movement cards, which I won't need on the first turn, in the hopes of getting cards that might work for influence for recruiting purposes. That's my thought process right here. I'm thinking that that's probably the way I'm going to go. Another benefit of this is Rethink is tactic number 2, and the lower your number, the sooner you go. So picking 1 obviously means you go first. So I have a very good chance of going first before the dummy player, which essentially in this game means I get an extra round, an extra turn in this round, because if the dummy player goes before me, he's going to end up declaring end of round that much sooner. So I kind of like that as my option, and I think that's what I'm going to take. So here's how this is going to work. The Rethink card says, when you take this tactic, discard up to 3 cards, including wounds, from your hand, then draw that many cards. Shuffle your discard pile back into your deed deck. Now, importantly, it says when you take this tactic, and of course you're taking the tactic right at the beginning of the round. So it's always going to be after you've just reshuffled everything, you have nothing currently in your discard pile, etc. So this card is always going to be to kind of kick you off right at the beginning. You're planning your new day, everything's dawned bright and shiny and new, but you get a crappy draw right out of the gate. You can try to mitigate that by taking some of those cards out of your hand, drawing 2 new ones, which means because you're drawing them before you're shuffling your old cards back in, you will not be grabbing those cards you just discarded. So you know you're going to be exchanging them for something new. And then those 2 are basically just going back into your D deck and it's getting reshuffled. So essentially, all this is doing at the end of the day is taking up to 3 cards out of your hand and replacing them with cards from your deck, then shuffling the old ones back in. It also, again, has the virtue of being number 2, which means I'm probably going to go first. So let's see what I draw. First of all, I'm going to, as I discussed, I'm going to get rid of Cold Toughness and Stamina. I'm not discarding them permanently. These are coming back to me, and of course I want that. But they're not something that I really need right now on this very first turn of the round, and that's why I'm going to throw them back into the deck, hoping that I get something that's going to be a little bit more useful to me in the short term. So let's see what I get. I've got 2 more cards, and this is Swiftness. Might be helpful later, although probably not, because looking at the keep, I'm going to be looking at Fortified Enemy. So not the best card, but it has movement. Maybe I need that. And that's pretty good. Influence. is going to allow me some options for when I get into the village there and start wanting to recruit people. Okay, so that gives me something to play with. I'm going to have to take these 2 cards and put them back into the deck and then shuffle the deck. And that now is my opening hand. So what's left now is I need to go ahead and grab the random tactics card from the pile here for the dummy player. This pile here is already shuffled, so I'll just grab the one off the top, and my grand plan has not borne fruit. I was not expecting him to draw lower than me. He did get a lower score, so he's actually going to wind up going first. So this ordering of the tokens here is correct. The dummy player is getting to go first in virtue of drawing the 1, which is lower than the 2. Not really the end of the world for me here. He didn't grab any of the tactics on offer that I might want to use later, and I don't generally pick early bird. I can think of a handful of times when I've done it, but really I don't generally pick it. I think it's better when you're dealing with multiple players in a competitive scenario. Then you really want to go first. Make sure you get that first keep or first crack at the keep or something like that. But I don't mind letting the dummy player go first, especially early on, when I don't usually, later in the game, I usually am dealing with upwards of 30 or more cards in my hand. So being able to play through them all and actually be able to use all the resources at my disposal is pretty tough to do. So it's then that I usually start trying to grab the lower number cards that are on offer. And be able to go first, because in virtue of him going first, he's going to obviously go before me, which means I've got one less turn essentially this round than I otherwise would have, because he's going to declare end of round a lot much sooner. Although there are a lot of times, again, in the first round when I might be the one declaring end of round, so I'm not too worried about it early on. Not really a bad draw for me. So he's going first. Let's reckon with that. He's going to draw, again, 3 cards off the top of his deck, and we're going to have to just find out what those are. That's a red. I don't want to see those going by too quickly. Then he gets a green, but that's the second card. It's really only the third that I need to worry about, and fortunately for me, that is a red. Had it been a green, I would have had to draw 2 more cards, and instead of having 13 left in his hand, he'd only have 11. But because that third card was a red and he has no red crystals in his inventory, that's actually the end of his turn. So again, my plan here was to use this movement to then try to grab some of influence and recruit a unit up here. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is just bop up and over into the village here, and then I can take a look at the units on offer. And if you remember, actually all 3 of these are available. And I think what I'm going to do, I like having offense off the bat, and especially early, I really like having some ranged attack. It really helps you avoid taking wounds early on that can slow you down. So I'm tempted by the Utim crossbowmen. The herbalists are actually really nice. They're very cheap, they're very easy to get, but these guys are a little bit more useful, I think, generally. And the only problem there is they're going to be harder to recruit. I'll have to take a look at that. I might be able to do that this round, I might not. What I know I am going to have to do is I'm going to have to play a green movement card, March, and I'm going to have to power that with a green die from the source, and then I'm going to have to add the stamina card for another 2 movement. That's going to give me a total of 6, which is enough to spend 2, and then another 3 to get me into the village. Now my decision is going to be based on the fact that, one, I don't have any other sources of mana available, so I'm playing just the face values of these cards. So actually that's an easy decision to make. At this point, I could generate 5 influence with the cards that I have on offer here, but I kind of would like to keep this. So that would be enough to get either the Herbalists here, which only would cost 3, or the Thugs, which aren't horrible. I just hate not having the option to assign them damage and then losing reputation to use them for other purposes. So I think what I'm going to do is, while it's risky because you want to try to spend cards quickly because of that dummy player, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my hand and I'm going to say I'm only going to play those 2 cards. And I'm going to hope that, well, I know for sure that next round I can, at worst case scenario, I can roll this gold to bop one of these up to get 6 influence. So I know I have 6 influence on offer next turn. And that's going to give me all kinds of options. I'm also in the village, which I might be able to plunder to get additional cards later if I need to. But yeah, basically I'm going to call that a turn and know that I'm going to be able to recruit a unit next round and see where things go from there. So to wrap up my turn, I'm going to take my die and I'm going to roll it to see what I get out of it. It goes back to green. So I plop that back in the source. And then these 2 I pick up and drop to my discard pile. And then I go ahead and I click this to draw back up to 5 cards and see what I get. Okay. Gives me some options, certainly, for next round, especially with green in the source. I'm liking that. That's actually pretty cool. Okay. So that is my first turn of round 1. So once my first turn is completed, what I need to do is return now to the dummy player. Remember, with just 2 people in the turn sequence, it goes him, me, him, me, him, me. It just bounces back until somebody runs out of cards and declares end of round, and that's usually the dummy player in a 1-player game. Now, I got lucky on the first draw, having to use only 3 of his cards. He has 16 in his deck to start with. So that's going to mean the following, because especially with him going first, he could draw in the first round before he's added any crystals in between rounds 1 and 2. He can potentially draw 5 cards every turn. Starting with 16 in his hand, that means that he's going to have, worst case scenario, draw 5, then draw 5, then draw 5, and still have 1 in his hand, which means that's another turn. So that's 4 turns that he spends turning over cards, and the turn that he's running out of cards, he's actually not going to be declaring end of round. He declares end of round when he starts his turn with no cards in his deck. So that means he's going to turn over cards at least 4 times, and then spend another turn declaring end of round, after which I have 1 more go of it. So he's going to have at least 5 turns of his own, which means with me going after him, I'm guaranteed to have 5 turns. If I get a little bit luckier, I might have 6 or 7, possibly. If he's only turning over 3 each time, he might have, 6 rounds turning over cards, and then 1 card declaring end of round. So he might have as many as 7, giving me therefore 7. So I know first round I'm having between 5 and 7 turns in the round. I don't know what they are until they start turning over cards. So that's what is going to happen now. I'm going to see what happens with this second flop. Remember, it's only the 3rd card that tells me how many more I need to turn over. So he begins by turning over a green, a blue, and a red. And again, he has no red crystals in his hand, so that's actually quite good for me. Again, he's down to only 10 cards after 2 flops. That's handy. So if you recall, my plan here was to come into the village with the express purpose of trying to recruit the crossbowmen that are available there. These guys here. Most expensive unit, and while the others have their advantages, I just really like having the option of some ranged attack, especially early. And they're always good to throw down for some attack or block. Decent armor in the event that I have an emergency wound to take. Herbalists are really handy for a first level unit, but I find that they're more valuable for healing and for readying units. So oddly enough, they're actually better a little bit later game. And I find that later game is when you have level 3 and 4 units available, and those are usually the ones you're trying to get instead. So I actually, as much as I like the herbalists, and it's not like I never take them, I find that if I take them early, I don't use them that much early on, and then when I have them late, I usually wind up replacing them. The crossbowmen are going to give me some offensive punch pretty quick right out of the gate, and if you recall, I'm going to be moving over here, depending on what cards I get, and where I'm going. I'm thinking long term here. I'm thinking my options right now, I'm not going to go back through this forest to go this way. I'm not going to spend 5 points during the day to go into a desert just for a crystal. So I'm looking at going, I think, this way, this direction here. If I go into the plain, it's only 2 movement, and then it's only 2 to go into the keep from there, but the wall in between actually adds 1 point of movement. So to assault that keep would actually require 5 movement points, and the person in there is going to benefit from the additional fortification of the wall, which I believe gives whoever's in there double fortification from the fortification of the site itself plus that of the wall. Not the best. So what I would probably do is move onto the plain, see what's in there, and then make that decision. But if I decide I don't want to attack that, then what do? I probably don't want to go through the desert. I'm probably going to wind up going back through this maze. So what I think I'm going to do is try to move onto the maze anyway. I might flop a tile and see what's there, but if moving there, I like that unit or I like the hand that I get, such that I might maybe try my hand at the maze. Either of those might be a pretty good option. So I'm going to take a look at... the reason I'm mentioning all of this is I need to decide what I want to do in playing my cards when recruiting this unit. I know that I would like to have those crossbowmen, although they're most likely their ranged attack is not going to help me assaulting that keep, but it can help me in the maze against a brown enemy. So that might be another way to go. I'll have to see what flops when I move there, but basically what I'm thinking is I want to get those crossbowmen and I want to keep my swiftness and my concentration just in case I wind up going into the maze, because there's a good chance that with 5 range attack from swiftness and concentration plus the 2 from the crossbowmen that I will have, that I'm going to be able to take out at range something that's in that maze. I got a pretty good shot at that, so I want to keep that play open for me. So what I think I'm going to do is, I want to not use concentration for recruiting purposes. I need 6 influence, but rather than playing concentration to turn this into 6 and keep a card, I think what I'm going to do, because I don't anticipate using influence again once I recruit a unit, I'm probably not going to recruit another one in the keep. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Promise, and I'm going to power that with, as much as I hate using it, I anticipate next turn using green with concentration. So I'm going to use gold mana from the source, turn it into white to play Promise to get 4 influence. And then I'm going to play Threaten for another 2. And that's enough to give me 6 to recruit the crossbowmen in the town. Now, I have movement cards. I have the option of maybe drawing some cards and such, but I'm not going to move. I'm not going to do anything else. In fact, I actually can't move because I've already interacted. And once you interacted, you've used your action. Your action has to come after your movement on your turn. So because I'm not going to play Tranquility to draw another card because I don't have anything I'm trying to actually do right now, I am going to call that the end of my turn and roll the die to see what I get. It's a blue. Okay, so that is the end of that turn. That was a quickie, and in general I don't necessarily like only playing 2 cards, but I was already in the village and I wanted to recruit somebody, and that's pretty much all she wrote in that situation. Getting a unit is definitely worth it. So I have nothing else to do upkeep wise except draw back up to my 5 card limit. Let's see what I get. It's another swiftness. That's interesting. I got a lot of ranged attack in my hand. I'm starting to think unfortunately there's not a lot of movement in my hand. I'm starting to think I might wind up going into the maze, but I don't have a lot of move to get in there. But I'll deal with that in just a minute. What I'm going to do now is, because that was the end of my turn, I need to go over to the dummy player and see what his flop turns out to be. His first card is a blue and a green. I like seeing those go on the first 2 cards because it means it's less likely for my 3rd card to be a green. And hey, there you go. I've gotten pretty lucky so far with him. That's a white, meaning no other cards are dropped, and that's the end of Goldix's turn. That's going pretty well for me over there. All right, let's look back at our hand, start looking at our options here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move onto the maze, and that will, because I'm adjacent during the daytime, that will tell me what this unit is once I'm on that hex. And the only real decision I have at this point is what play do I want to make in order to make that happen. And I'm thinking I might want to speed this process along, because the only way I could move right now would be to play one of my swiftness cards, but I think I might want to keep those for offense if I can. I don't want to play these cards sideways for movement because I might need them. But I am in a village. It might be a little bit ballsy. It might bite me later on. But one option that you have when you're in a village, at the start of your turn, before you do anything else, you can plunder it. You take 1 hit to your reputation, which isn't going to hurt me right away, and it allows me to draw 2 additional cards into my hand. That's going to give me a lot more options this turn, because I really want to have some more cards in my hand, and I'd like to have the option of not blowing my swiftness to get the movement to move onto the maze. So I think what I'm going to need to do, what I am going to do, I think, is take the hit to my reputation and plunder that village. It's a little ballsy, but it does allow me to draw 2 additional cards. Okay, I did get a movement card. That's pretty nice. And yeah, that does give me something to play with here, because the maze here is in a wasteland, which is 4 movement points. And fortunately, I am now in a situation where I can go ahead and get onto that pretty quickly. But there's a lot of cards here that aren't immediately useful to me. I think what I'm going to do, just because again, I don't know what's in that keep, but I might need straight up attack. Now let's just see what happens. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play move 2, and I'm not going to use a crystal to power it. I do have blue in the source, but I'm thinking I want to use green in case I go into combat. So, yeah. Let's do that just to see what's on the what's on here. And okay. So the enemy's in there. That's interesting. These guys are in the keep, so they are fortified. But they're not double fortified because of the wall, and they actually have the unfortified quality, so they actually cannot benefit from the site fortifications, which means all this ranged attack that I have, unfortunately I just used some of it, but all this ranged attack in my hand, I have 7 in my hand with concentration, so I actually can take this guy out. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play this card sideways, and I think I'm going to play Tranquility sideways, and that'll give me the 2 movement that I need to move on to the keep and attack it, because it's in a grassland, so its movement is the same as the underlying terrain. So I'm going to be able to attack this enemy here. And yeah, I can do that. I have not used a die from the source yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Concentration with a green, which allows me to play another action card and get the stronger effect of that card for free. And if that's giving me move, influence, block, or any type of attack, I get that amount plus 2. So I'm going to play that with Swiftness to get 5 ranged attack. Then I'm going to activate my Utum crossbowmen for their 2 ranged attack, giving me a total of 7 ranged attack, which is what I need to kill this guy. He's susceptible to the ranged attack because he's not able to benefit from the site fortifications. His armor is 6 because he's elusive and I haven't blocked him yet, but I can meet that 6, so I can kill him. And that is nice because that does a couple of things for me. I like to just pile up my corpses over here. That allows me to take ownership of this keep here, for one thing, which is a couple of points in the end game. It also is going to add to my keep total. Sometimes you build up a nice number of captured keeps, and that can really help you late game, which if it comes up we'll talk about. But basically when you're on or near a keep you own, you get to increase your hand size limit by the number of keeps that you own. So that was the reason I did this rather than rolling some dice on a maze. The maze is nice because if you spend some movement, you could get some nice cards out of it. But I didn't know what I was going to be facing until I went in there. And this was a known quantity. I know it's going to get me to level 2. I know I'm not going to take any wounds. And I'm going to be able to take a keep, which might help me end game. It's a safer play. It's a little bit more conservative, but I think it'll work for me. Okay, so I've played a bunch of cards, used a die from the source, and that is the end of my turn. But I do level up as a result of this. 2 consequences from this assault. My reputation does take another hit because I have assaulted a fortified site. But I also do gain 3 fame, which allows me to level up. So I'm going to go ahead and clear up this play area. I'm going to roll my die because gaining the some they're blue. Gaining the level up happens kind of after your turn is over, pretty much. So I'm just going to group those cards and throw them onto the discard. Now I am in a keep, so my hand size is increased by the number of keeps that I own, so I'm actually able to draw up to 6, even though my current hand limit is 5. So I can draw up to 6 cards. Whoops, I have to back that up. I just realized, because right before I draw, as part of my level up, I'm going to draw an advanced action card. So let me back those guys back up to where they were. This is where I was at the end of my turn. Before I draw my new hand, I get the 2 perks from my level up. I get to pick one of the following 2 skills. And that's an interesting choice. Sharpshooting's nice, and I do have a nice love of ranged attack. I love being able to go into combat and not take any wounds and not have to spend points on block. But I have found Knight Sharpshooting is very situational. I've found that I might use it once or twice to maybe save a card here or there in a turn. It can really save your bacon, but I don't give a damn is a really nice card. It allows you to play any card once a turn sideways for 2 instead of 1. It doesn't allow you to change what you're able to use it for, but it also allows you to play other cards like spells and advanced actions for 3. Being able to just plunk down and throw Crystallize for 2 movement when you really need it or something like that is really handy. Or a spell that you know you're not going to use this turn, or you don't have the mana to use this turn, turning that into 3 move or 3 block or something like that. It's a very versatile skill, so I think I'm going to grab that one, which means this skill goes into the communal offer, and as that would be relevant if there was a multiplayer game, but basically the communal offer means I can't take anything here. And Goldix will then contribute to the communal offer his skill. It's his co-op skill, which is a weird one, but we'll deal with that when I gain my next level. As far as the advanced action card, there's a number of factors that are going to go into what I want to take here. By no means the least thing on my mind is that I'm dealing with Goldix here, and there's a green spell card coming up, so he's within a turn or 2 very likely to be having 3 green crystals, and these are going to start adding to his hand. If I let both of these go to his hand and this, he's got 3 crystals and a ton of green cards that are going to flop, triggering those crystals, so he's going to start burning through his hands really quick as this game goes on. So as lucky as I've been with drawing Goldix so far, this flop wasn't great given that I'm using Goldix as the dummy. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm leaning, especially since I don't really care for Decompose all that much, I'm leaning towards 1 or 2 of these. Training is very tempting early on, but I haven't had a whole lot of luck with training in the past. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's been my luck with it so far, but Crushing Bolt is very handy. Siege is great, and free green crystals is always good. It's a nice dependable card, so I think I'm going to grab that one. And the reason I had to take my cards back to my hand after I did that flop is when you get that advanced action card, it comes to the top of your D deck. So when you gain a card like that, or when you earn a spell or something, it's going to go to the top of your D deck, meaning that when you start your next turn, it's going to be the first card that you turn over when you draw your new hand. So now I'm going to draw up to 6 cards because I've finished leveling. And I have, I think, 1 card left in my hand at this point. And some nice cards to play with here. It looks like I'm going to be able to start throwing stuff into my inventory. And I've got some options here for where I go going forward. So that was a pretty good turn. I gained a level, took a keep, gained a nice advanced action and my first skill. And I still got plenty of time this round because thus far anyway Goldix has been cooperating. So let's turn now to Goldix and see what he does. Alright, so Goldix is going to draw a white, a blue, and another blue. Okay? Well, it's not a green, but he does have a blue crystal in his inventory, so what that means is I have to now draw one more card. And as a result of that, he has only 3 left in his hand. What I know from that is that his next turn he's going to flop those 3 cards, and no matter what that color is, he doesn't have any more cards to flop. So he's going to have one more turn flopping the rest of his cards, and then another turn after that, during which he will declare end of round, and I will get a turn after that. So what that means is I will have a turn, then he'll flop 3 cards, then I'll have another turn, then he'll declare end of round, then I'll have another turn. So I know I have 3 turns left in this round to play with. I don't have a lot of cards right now, and I don't have a ton of stuff on my agenda, but now is kind of the point where I'm using the fact that I have 3 to play with to try to maximize what I'm going to get out of this round. So, kind of surveying where I'm at, one option would be to go to the maze and try to grab a card there, but in order to do that, I would have to spend a lot of movement and fight a fairly tough enemy, most likely. Now, I do have some combat cards in my hand, but I don't have any ranged attack, and I don't have a unit. So whatever I fight, I'm going to have to block or take wounds from, and then manage to kill. Brown enemies aren't like super hard, but I'm thinking that if I fought a brown enemy after spending enough move to get in there, in fact, how could I even do that? I have green in the source, so I could play March for 4 movement. That would get me onto the maze. But if I want to use the maze, I'm going to want to at least get a spell. Getting a couple of crystals out of a maze isn't really worth this detour. I could get a spell if I spent another 4, but that means I have to find a way to get 8 movement. So I could play this, use my green mana, and play Instinct, and another maybe crystallize sideways with I don't give a damn to get 8 movement. But then I'm left fighting whatever is in there with just Cold Toughness, Crushing Bolt, and Rage. Having used mana from the source. That's not great. I could play March and get onto the maze this turn, call that the end of my round, and then dive in next turn with whatever's left, which might, I want to say it's Rage. I don't remember seeing my other Rage card. So I have a bunch of combat, but I'm still going to have to spend 2 cards to get enough movement to get a spell, and I'll have a bunch of attack, but not a lot of block options. So I'm not actually liking my odds in that fight all that much, because there are some nasty brown enemies. I think what I might want to do, if I had a unit or 2, I would be much more confident about that. I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to keep moving. Mazes and dungeons and tombs and monasteries are kind of a dime a dozen. I might even have a good easy path to this monastery over here, so maybe I go over here this way and start thinking about burning that down at the beginning of my next round, or grabbing this guy to help my reputation or something like that. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to reveal these tiles over here in order to get the lay of the land and see what my options are. I think that's the better way to do it. I'm going to want to do it anyway, and I like revealing tiles quickly so I can get to the core tiles and reveal those gold units as soon as I possibly can and start working on them, so I can get them recruited before I start fighting things in cities. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play March with that green from the source, but I'm not going to use that to go into the maze. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to reveal these 2 tiles. I'm going to reveal this one first because you want to try to put tiles next to 2. I think the rule is you have to put a countryside tile next to 2 revealed tiles, or next to a tile that is next to 2 revealed tiles. So I could have done this one first, but whatever at that point. Okay, so I've got a ruin up here and another keep, and I'll go ahead and drop those tokens. I do have a rampaging enemy showing up here. It's a summoner. They're never... I don't like those because I really like knowing what I'm going to fight. And because it's daytime, the ruin is going to be revealed. Okay. This is one where basically I turn in 1 mana of every color and get 10 victory points. The problem is, how the heck would I be able to produce 10 mana? Or, sorry, 1 mana of every color at this point. I could draw one from the source. I might be able to get something with Crystallize this turn and then Crushing Bolt, but I'm still one short. And that's 10 victory points. Right now, really, my focus is just, I'm not too worried about my score. It's a playthrough. I want to show you more the victory condition and conquering the cities than maximizing my score and actually going all that way just for 10 victory points and no other appreciable benefit. I'm not even sure that really does that much for my score. Anyway, I'd have to reckon with a summoner to move on to that space. No, that's just a headache. So I'm not even at this point thinking of going there. You know what I think I want to do? I'm liking the idea of that monastery and then maybe seeing what's over here and the crystal mine, maybe exploiting this crystal mine. Because here's the thing, is I have a little bit of movement, I have a little bit of attack, but if I spend too much movement getting up to a keep, I'm not going to be able to attack anything. So essentially what I'm looking at is I might be able to go over here and maybe take out the summoner. But I kind of blew my wad on the ranged attack. I have 3 siege, but that's not enough to kill him because he's got 4 armor. So I don't see a good way to kill him. I don't see a good way to get up here and kill that. I don't see a good way to go down here. So really what's left with my couple remaining turns is trying to get what I can out of it. And I'm thinking at least I can stockpile some crystals before this turn is over, and then maybe wreck some face elsewhere. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to that crystal because that's going to position me next to possibly something useful here. Maybe there's a rampager right here. Or at least I can go onto the monastery, possibly get an advanced action, and maybe take this guy out. If I'm right here, I got a lot of options for going up or sideways here. And with Crushing Bolt and Crystallize, I could have a pretty nice crystal stockpile here. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So I know I've got 2 more turns after this turn to play with. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to play the Rage card here sideways, toggling I don't give a damn, whoops, to make that 2 movement. And as a result, that's going to allow me to move on to the village. And then I think what I want to do, yeah, because every time I end my turn on a crystal mine, I get a crystal. I want to get onto that as soon as I possibly can, so I'm going to then play Instinct for 2 movement. And then I'm going to play Cold Toughness sideways to make it 3, which is enough to get onto the hill. And that will allow me to grab a white crystal to my inventory. I'm going to hold off and see what card I get next round. I've got 2 turns left to use up these last 3 cards. That should be plenty. And I'm thinking that's probably going to wind up with me having 3 white crystals on top of everything else, which is always a nice little bonus here. Okay, so that's the end of that round. Grab these guys, flop that over, rotate that back. I'm back down to drawing up to 5 cards because I'm not adjacent to my keep that I own any longer. But I can draw up to 5, I only have 1, so it doesn't matter. And it is in fact the Rage card. Okay. So that is that turn. We shoot over to Goldix here, and he's going to flop his remaining cards. It kind of doesn't matter what's the last one. Green. Would have mattered, but it doesn't. So then it comes back to me. And yeah, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and play Crushing Bolt to get a green crystal to my inventory. And I'm going to play Crystallize with do I want blue? If I play with blue, I can get any color I want. I'm going to get a white crystal at the end of this round, and then a white crystal at the end of another round. I'm anticipating very likely some combat soon, so I think what I'll do is play this with a red. I could do it with red or blue, it doesn't matter at this point, and turn that into a red crystal for some offensive pop. And I think what I'm going to do with the Rage card is play it sideways with I don't give a damn for 2 movement, and that's enough to allow me to flop this next tile. I could move on to the Monastery, but I know I'm going to want to flop that tile anyway if I do go that way, so I might as well flop it now and get the extra crystal for staying on the mine another turn. So I'm not going to play it now, because if I play it now, I'm kind of not getting another turn. Remember, Goldix hasn't declared end of round yet. So I get another turn after this if I don't use up my cards. I'm not sure if next turn, if I don't have any cards, it still counts as me getting a turn. But I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm done with that. And that's white, but it doesn't matter. Those guys are gone. And at the end of that round, that turn, I get a white crystal. We go over to Goldix, he declares end of round, it comes back to me for my final turn, and I play Rage sideways with I don't give a damn, and that will give me the 2 movement I want to flop this next terrain tile. Okay, so I've got a dungeon here, got another rampaging enemy, and another monastery, actually. Now, theoretically, I should flop another advanced action card into the monastery skills offer, but as this is the absolute end of everything turn-wise, I'm not going to bother with that because it's not going to accomplish anything. That is technically what you should do, but just imagine I flopped a card and then we immediately discard it when we recycle everything at the end of turn. Okay, so at the end of that turn, I get my final white crystal from, again, ending my turn on a crystal space. And that is the end of day 1. So what happened at the end of the day is I marched up through here, recruited a unit, moved over, took a keep, and then moved over and started stockpiling crystals. As a result of this, I have a nice stash of mana saved up. I have a pretty good unit in tow. I've gained a level and added one to my keep numbers, which could be very handy in the late game. That's a pretty good clip for the first round. If you gain a level and reveal a tile or 2 and hopefully recruit a unit, I think you're doing pretty good on your first turn. So that worked out pretty well. And we'll go ahead and reset everything and get everything set up for the night. And then we'll be back. Okay, so before moving on to the reset for night, there's just a couple of things that I want to address. A couple of things that maybe went by a little bit quickly as I went through that playthrough, or that I actually neglected as I was going through it. First thing I want to mention is that when I gained that level, if you remember, I drew the 2 skills from my stack, and that's randomized. You shuffle your stack of 10 skills, and you pick which one you want when you gain a level. Now, you do have the option of choosing from the communal skill offer, but in a solo game, when you first start out, there's nothing in that offer because nobody's contributed anything to it yet. And there's a couple of rules related to this. First of all, when you're playing solo against the dummy does have their stack of 10 skills, and they do contribute to the communal skill offer. However, the way the rule is set, you are going to take the top skill, just one, from the top of that stack and add it to the communal skill offer after you've taken a skill. So that first skill choice, he hasn't put anything into the communal skills offer yet, and it doesn't happen until the wake, the resolution after I've taken my skill. It's then that triggers him to take his next thing and drop it into the communal skill offer for the next time that I level up. Now, when you take a skill of your own from the 2 that you draw, then you're allowed to just take whichever advanced action card that goes along with it. Remember, when you gain a level with a skill, you're also gaining an advanced action, and you can take it from any of the 3. By the way, now that I'm looking at this, after taking Crushing Bolt, I should have refreshed the offer, which means sliding that card down and turning over another one into a place. Of course, it's yet another green. This is just wonderful. But be that as it may, that should have been done immediately. Now, when I pick one of my own skills, I can take any of the 3 on offer, no problem. If the next time I gain a level, I choose to take one of the communal skill offers, first of all, I believe I'm not allowed to take my own. Once I've rejected my own, I'm not allowed to take it. So it might as well just be flopped over here. But I can take one of Goldix's offerings at any point when I'm gaining level. And later on in the game, there might be 5 or 6 of Goldix's skills up here to choose from. However, if I do choose to take one of Goldix's skills, I must take the skill that is at the bottom of the skills offer. The action card, the advanced action card that is at the bottom of the advanced action offer. That's just a limitation on having that additional selection from somebody else's stack. Okay, so those are your options. Pick one of the 2 that you randomly select and then take any card you want from the offer, or you can take one from the communal skills offer, and that's a little bit more interesting in a multiplayer game. But you can choose to take one of the dummy skills. However, that limits you to taking just the bottommost advanced action card from the offer. All right, so 2 things there. I wanted to stress about how the tokens get flopped from the dummy player, and the fact that it wasn't an option on my first level, but it will be subsequent to that. And then, of course, how this is refreshed and how which choice you make impacts which cards you can select from. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that when placing tiles, again, you're going to randomize your city and non-city core tiles at the bottom of the stack. Then you randomize the countryside tiles on top of that, and you draw from the top of the deck. And how many of each are going into there is given in the scenario description, depending on the scenario that you're playing. Now, when you take those, normally you must orient them, and there is, if you look down at them, there is going to be a certain orientation whereby there's a number on the tile. If you zoom way in here, you can see a number at the bottom of this tile here, number 7. You're lining up the circles and the stars on the corners whenever you place the tile, and you're going to have the number there oriented in the same orientation as the letter on your starting tile. So you'll see all the numbers on all these tiles are at the bottom because that's how the starting tile is oriented. Now you're allowed to play a variant where you randomize the tiles, but that is out of the box how you're supposed to orient the tiles. So there's no question about how they should be placed. It's pretty much locked in. Another question regarding tiles and how you're placing them is depending on the start tile that you have. In this case, I have the wedge. You are expected to anticipate these coastlines sort of extending out forever, creating a V shape. So those lines, that angle that is created here with these initial tiles, that's supposed to just continue on ad infinitum. Therefore, you're never allowed to place tiles outside of those. Any tile you place has to be within that angle that you formed. So if I was to come over here and attack this catapult, I can't then be sitting here and explore down here. That's not a legal tile placement. There are additional restrictions for placing core tiles that we will get into when the time arises, but I wanted to note that. So when I start discussing what my next sort of plan is here, that's why I'm not kind of coming this way and taking easy terrain options to come around this way. I'm going to have to reckon with either going through swamps and forests at night, or else going through the hills, or backtracking over here. And that's just because going this way is not an option. All right. So I hope that cleared up a couple of things, and now we can take a look at how to reset everything for night. One last thing, I mentioned that I should have refreshed the advanced action offer, and I also mentioned that I should have technically flopped an advanced action card here, but I'm not going to because it's pointless. Notice I am not refreshing the unit offer, and that is by design. The unit offer does not get refreshed. It's a bigger deal when you're in a multiplayer game, but when you snag units, new ones do not come up until you go to the next round. Otherwise, you might be able to recruit a unit and hope for a good flop and then recruit another one or something like that, even in a solo game. And then there's the added wrinkle in a multiplayer game, especially a competitive game, whereby you might be trying to grab that good unit first before anybody else is able to get it. So that's something to bear in mind as you go forward. Again. All right, let's take a look now at how to reset everything for night. All right, so the first thing that happens when we go to a new turn is all of my units get refreshed. If they're wounded, they don't get healed, but they do get refreshed so they can be reused. If I have any skills that have been flopped over because they are once a round, then I get to flop them back over. However, that is not the case. I have one that is usable once a turn, so I just kind of keep refreshing it every time. My deck is going to get reshuffled, including, of course, all the cards that I added to it. Nothing's discarded or thrown away unless it's said so during the course of play. So your deck's going to keep growing as you go through the game. And I'm already up to 17 cards from my original 16. That'll probably climb a little bit faster as we go. Now, in the in the rules regarding the tactics, both cards for a solo game that have been picked, whether it was you or the dummy player, they're both gone for good. So we're down now to only 4 cards in the daytime tactics stack, but as we're using 2 every time, that's going to be enough to get through the third day. We're going to face the same thing with night, so one of the first things we're going to have to do is pick our night tactics card, but that's actually not the immediate next thing that we do. I'm also going to be taking the dummy player's deck and resetting that, including a nice good shuffle. But before I even really technically should do that, there are 2 things that are going to happen. First, when I reset for the next round, the unit offer is going to get refreshed. So I'm going to clear those cards away. All right, they're going to go to the discard piles. And I'm still pulling just 3 regular units because I've not yet exposed a core tile. So I'm going to go ahead and just flop the next 3 regular units to find out my unit offer. And the way this mod here on Tabletop Simulator is coded, it also is going to flop the additional monastery card, which again I forgot to drop the second monastery token on there, and that's going to cause the additional advanced action card to populate as well. So we've got Mana Storm and Heroic Tale, either of which I can possibly go into a monastery and convince the monks to teach me. That would require 6 influence. So that's an option. Considering that I'm right next to a monastery, that might be something that I look into, depending on what cards I pull. Now, I'm also going to refresh the advanced action deck, and if you're in a multiplayer game with no dummy player, all that's going to happen is basically you're going to discard that end card, and then you're going to slide these cards over and flop over 1 additional card. However, because I do have a dummy player, that last card is actually, instead of being discarded, it's going to go into the deck for the dummy player and get shuffled in there. And unfortunately it was green, and he does have green crystals, which means he's that much more likely to be flopping a green card over and then flopping 2 additional cards. So that's not great for me. I then go ahead and refresh the offer like so. Now the spell card is going to get discarded. It does not go into the dummy player's deck, but we do, before we refresh the deck, note the color of the spell card. It is white, and what that means is the dummy player is going to add a white crystal to its inventory, meaning now that when I flop a white card, I will have to flop an additional card. Okay. Now, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, which crystals you want the dummy player to be getting. If they, really quickly run up to 3 greens, it's not the end of the world if they're not flopping green cards, but if they do keep flopping green cards, then that's going to hit you pretty hard. Whereas if you distribute the crystals out through the basic colors, I find that the pace that you need to maintain is, if nothing else, a little bit more predictably average, which I think helps in planning what you're going to do. So I do prefer to do that, but it's not a super huge issue. I don't think it's as important as worrying about which advanced action cards you're adding when considering which crystals are already there. You also might want to keep track of how many advanced action cards you have added when considering what crystals you want to add into there. So if you know you've added a ton of red or green advanced action cards, then maybe you want to avoid red or green crystals going into the inventory. So it's a little bit like card counting at that point. But now, having added that white crystal to the inventory because of the color of the spell card, I refresh the spell offer, which means discarding the bottom one and sliding everything over and adding a new one. And of course, hey, what do you know? It's another green. We're green heavy for some reason in this game. Nothing happens on the map except we are going to flip over our day-night tile. And really all that is going to do is just change the image, but also going to change the terrain costs. So now that the difference between day and night is essentially deserts are 5 during the day, 3 during the night, and forests are 5 during the night and 3 during the day. That's pretty much all that really changes. At no point can you, without a special card, go through lakes or mountains. And cities are always 2, no matter what terrain they appear to be painted on. Everything else remains the same. And of course, the only impact of this is going to be on what mana is playable from the source. So I'll go ahead and flip that. Now in the mod here, it darkens the map, I guess just as a reminder that it is nighttime. Not my favorite thing about this mod, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. And another impact of night on the game is that before, when I was moving adjacent to a keep, I was revealing the token that was inside that keep, and that's going to go for mage towers and the like as well. That only happens during the day. At night, if you want to assault a keep, you have to just dive in not knowing what's there. It also is going to affect what sort of mana you get out of a magical glade, and it's going to affect ruin tokens. Ruin tokens are exposed immediately when it's daytime, but at night the ruins are kept hidden until you move onto the space. Rampagers, including the Draconum later, but certainly all these orc rampaging enemies, they are revealed when placed, whether it's day or night. It doesn't make a difference. All right. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of setup, except for picking our tactics and rolling the dice. We refresh the mana in the mana pool and see what we get there. And we got a pretty standard result. We got a blue, a red, and a white. No black, no gold to play with or worry about. So what we're at right now is essentially we're going to draw up to our card limit, which is 5 right now. And again, we're not next to a keep that we own, so it stays 5. So I'm going to draw 5 cards, and I'm able to do that before I draw or select my nighttime tactic, so that I can reference what cards I have and whether or not I want to pick a tactic that will change that. So I'm going to be able to be aware of my hand. So that really is the entire setup for night. And I'm not going to flop that card because I want to go ahead and just save that for the next video for context. I'm going to flop those cards, and I'm going to select my tactics cards at the beginning of the night round. But that is where we're at, where we're going to start off next turn. We've had everything refreshed, and we're ready to begin night 1 of our Mage Knight playthrough, solo Conquest, with Tovak playing against dummy Goldex. We had a pretty good start on day 1, and things aren't looking too bad for night 1, although we're going to have to make a big decision here really quickly whether we want to go left or right here from where we're starting. But before we can make that decision with any skill whatsoever, we are going to have to reference what cards and tactics we have to play with. So I will leave that for next turn, and I hope to see you then. I'll go ahead and put this video together, and the next one should be out here pretty quick. Thanks for watching very much. If you like what you're seeing here, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you for night 1. Good hunting, Mage Knights.